Episode 6, The 10 Commandments versus Moses' Laws. Which one did God write with fire? There are 2 laws in Scripture, but false religion has done everything it can to blur the line. Why? Because if they can convince you that God's 10 Commandments are just part of Moses' temporary laws, they can throw them all away at once and build a religion on man's convenience, not God's command. But the Bible draws a sharp sword between the two. Let's begin with the 10 Commandments, written by God's own finger, Exodus 31:18, engraved on 2 tables of stone, Exodus 32:16, spoken by God himself before all Israel, Deuteronomy 5:22, placed inside the Ark of the Covenant, Exodus 40:20, called the Covenant and the foundation of God's law, Deuteronomy 4:13. Now compare that to Moses' laws, written by Moses' hand, Deuteronomy 31:9. Recorded in a book called the Book of the Law, contained rules for sacrifices, feasts, washings, and ceremonies. Placed beside the ark, not inside it, Deuteronomy 31:26. Called the law of ordinances and shadows of things to come, Colossians 2:14-17. These are not the same law. One is eternal, the other temporary. One reveals God's character, the other points to Christ's mission. And yet, Sunday preachers mix them together like muddy water. They say, the law was nailed to the cross. But which law? Because if it's Moses' law, yes, it ended with the cross. But if it's God's law, then you just nailed God's eternal commands to the tree. Blasphemy. Let's get this straight. The law of Moses told you to sacrifice lambs. The law of God said, "Thou shalt not kill." The law of Moses had feast days. The law of God said, "Remember the Sabbath day." The law of Moses was temporary. The law of God is forever. Jesus himself made this distinction. In Matthew 5:17 he thundered, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law." Heaven and earth are still here. So why do Sunday keepers act like God's law disappeared? Because they are not following Christ. They're following Rome. In Daniel 7:25, the Bible warned that a power would think to change times and laws, and it happened. Pope Sylvester and Emperor Constantine worked together to exalt Sunday and bury the Sabbath, but they couldn't touch the 10 Commandments, so they attacked them through confusion, and the churches fell for it. They tell you the 10 Commandments were abolished, but then turn around and quote 9 of them. They preach, "Obey your parents, don't steal, don't lie." But when it comes to the 4th commandment, the Sabbath, they call it Jewish, legalistic, obsolete. Lies. The Sabbath commandment sits right in the center of God's law. It is the seal of his authority, bearing his name, title, and territory. Take it out, and you've removed the only commandment that identifies the lawgiver. So here's the challenge to every pastor, priest, imam, and skeptic. Prove from Scripture that the 10 Commandments and Moses' ordinances are the same law. Prove that Jesus erased what his Father wrote in stone. Prove that God's covenant changed. If you can't, then you are building your religion on sand. Because when God wrote his law, he didn't use ink, he used fire, he didn't use a scroll, he used stone. That is forever.